It's just below Rakesh is on video. There's a gentleman with glasses. And there's a fan in the background.
Sujata, can you hear me? You have to unmute. I'd like to test the screen. Sharing the screen.
The person you're calling is not answering. Please try.
It's almost 5 now, so we'll start and then.
Now, 1 minute, can I just test the sharing screen?
Okay.
Or shall we do it after the intro? We'll just.
Yeah.
You please go ahead.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. A warm welcome from Intact Chennai chapter to each of you who's joined us today. And it's one of our Madras Day celebrations. August is always a marker of the city's birth. While we celebrate the city right through the year, we always have special programs at this part of the year to mark the city's birth. And today we have Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan, who will be speaking on the Buckingham Canal. So warm welcome to Venkatesh and to Elias Koshi, who's going to summarize at the end of the talk and present his observations. He's a conservation architect who's done a lot of work on the Buckingham Canal. INTAC, as you all know, the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, is in its 36th year, having been founded in 1984, with a vision to spearhead heritage awareness and conservation of India's vast unprotected heritage. As you all know, the Archaeological Survey of India protects monuments which are designated monuments across the country, but there are thousands and thousands of unprotected heritage, whether built heritage, intangible heritage, natural heritage, cultural heritage, so many aspects of heritage, and those are under INTAC's umbrella. In Chennai chapter, which is one of the 200 chapters across the nation, we hold programs through the year, which include talks, walks, of course, no walks during COVID, but workshops for architects and corporation engineers. And we've made documentary films, cleaned temple tanks, restoring heritage structures, and we brought out a guide to the architecture of Madras and also a heritage map of Chennai. All of these in some way or the other represent our rich and varied culture. We've created awareness in the city through these programs and brought to focus the significance of heritage in the city. Today's topic is on the important Buckingham Canal that ran the full length of Madras, parallel to the Coromandel coast. It started in Andhra, in Pedaganjam in the north, and ran all the way down to the south to Marakanam. Constructed in the 19th century, it was a busy waterway used for navigation, carrying food grains, coconuts, and of course people, including famous people like Mr. Olcott of Theosophical Society and Annie Besant. While the northern section was begun in 1800, the southern section was constructed later, and during one of the worst famines of 1877, the Duke of Buckingham and Chandos ordered a food for work scheme which connected the northern canal to the southern canal. And these segments were connected, and it also therefore brought about the connection between the Adyar and the Kuam, therefore forming the A, B, and C of the city's waterways. Today, Venkatesh Ramakrishnan focuses on the heritage of the areas through which the canal passes. We have palaces and educational institutions, cricket stadia and ice storage, temples and Portuguese structures all along the course of the Buckingham Canal. I would like to say a special thanks to Mr. Manohar Devdas, artist, who permitted us to use his fine ink drawings of the canal and its magnificent boats for our invitation. Thank you so much, sir. Welcome, Venkatesh. I request Malavika to introduce Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan as a historian, novelist, and columnist. He's a bilingual author. He writes both in Tamil and English. Kaveri Maindan, the son of Kaveri, is one of his 3 historical novels he's written in Tamil as sequel to Kalki's Ponniyin Selvan. Venkatesh has used social media revolution effectively to get people of similar interests onto 2 platforms, the Madras Local History Group and the Ponniyin Selvan Group. He resorted to crowdsourcing for information on lesser known places and local history. His first exploration was the cultural mapping of the river Kuam, which revealed interesting aspects of history. He's worked on the Adyar River and the Buckingham Canal. He is the recipient of the Vedavalli Memorial Award for Heritage from the TAG Foundation in 2019. Thank you, sir. We are honored to have you here today. Looking forward to your event. Thank you.
Just sharing the screen, a minute. Can you see the screen?
Not yet.
Can you?
No.
Waterways and heritage?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. This is not about the physics or the hydraulics or the mechanics of making a canal and running it. As it's become a habit with us, we try to see the history of the coasts or the shores of water bodies. When you look at the history of Mylapore, you find it is homogenic. We find similar things in street to street. But when you look at the history of a river, say Kuam, it passes through several eras and passes through several geographical zones, which throws up a lot of surprises. So we got sort of addicted to that, doing the Kuam and the Adyar. So let me start with saying that civilization is almost a synonym of rivers. But why should that bond be there? What does water have to do with drinking water's availability, have to do with Bharatanatyam dance or your Carnatic music or your silk weaving, as culture normally has? Why should art and literature, dance and dramatics, and even political thought flourish because of a river flowing nearby? What is the connection? The history of most urban rivers stretches before colonial times, before the Pallava times, they might have changed their courses, but they remain very, very ancient. Some even date to Paleolithic dates like the Kuom or the Adyar, where we find Paleolithic finds on their banks. Hence, observation of the movement of culture or the growth of culture along the banks is only the possible study in this link. We can never see like a scientific experiment in physics, introduce something and find out how the results are. But Madras got a chance to do that. What if a waterway is introduced fresh into an established civilization? Say Madras was 300 years, 250 years old when the Buckingham Canal was introduced. Would it not be able to help study the after effects of the socio-cultural attitudes of the residents? I'm sure it would. It's always been debated about the effect of a river has on a civilization. Social scientists wonder if it is just incidental or does the waterway foster prosperity and advance cultural achievement. A rare occasion to study this in action was when a new waterway was introduced within the city. Digging a canal through Madras has its impact on areas around it. From 1880 to 1960, the Buckingham Canal moved goods and passengers right through Madras. Mylapore and Triplicane were the biggest beneficiaries of this trade. It introduced trade, making places like Mylapore or Triplicane the entry point of goods rather than the consumer end. So the business started happening from these places. The accrued prosperity attracted migrants. It gave an increased chance for culture and education to grow. And more importantly, it enhanced a chance. It's a very important point. It enhanced the chance of different layers of a highly stratified society. Tamil Nadu is a highly stratified society, caste and religion. They were all getting together because of business in a small enclosure like Triplicane or Mylapore. It enhanced the chance of different layers of the highly stratified society to interact in a day-to-day for the first time. This resulted in great political realignments, which influenced the politics of Tamil Nadu even today. The study of the impact of Buckingham Canal tells us that there was a the better impact that it had on the Madras city than either the Kuom or the Adyar River. We always think that the Kuom is the queen of rivers in Madras, on whose banks the fort was formed and all the Indo-Saracenic buildings are there. But the Buckingham Canal, in an indirect way, seems to have influenced a lot of alignments, both economic, social, and political within the city. So this is a painting of Buckingham Canal, and you can see the Kalas Mahal behind. This was in an auction very recently. There's a woman drawing water from the canal, which I think is a very big exaggeration because it is so close to the Coombe, it must have been salt water. Coastal populations are high in India. Population settles a lot along the Coromandel coast and the Arabian Sea coast, and there's a great potential for transporting goods. It was actually happening. What the railways are doing today was being done by the Buckingham Canal. The British decided to do a canal parallel to the coast from East Godavari district to Villupuram. The canal was constructed and was an important waterway in the late 19th and 20th centuries. That is, we're talking about an entire waterway being functioning for 70, 80 years. Madras is a demographer's delight. One who studies population is called a demographer and demographer's delight. In spite of 2 world wars and Madras being bombed in both the wars, the only city in India to be done so, and evacuations that disrupted normal life and supply chains, Madras city grew from 4 to 14 lakhs in 60 years, which was very good at that point of time. How was the city able to supply its population with enough food grain to eat? Firewood. Firewood is a major fuel. There was no gas or kerosene at that point. And roads leading to Madras were not too great. It was not something that you could depend on to transport daily food to the city. The Buckingham Canal was the primary logistic provider for over half a century. So the city's growth depended on Buckingham Canal to grow and stabilize. I would just run through the basic history of Buckingham Canal and how it was dug before I go into the cultural part of its shores. It was done in parts. The first part was Chennai North to Ennur. The second part was Ennur to Pulikat. The third part was two parts, Pulikat to Krishna River as well as Adayar to Marakan. And the fifth part was the Buckingham Canal, that the junction canal that we talk about within Madras. And that formed the entire canal as one stretch. Many people were associated. When you do a project over 100 years, which is going to affect millions of people, it is not the idea of one person. It has many people are associated with the canal. It was Popham who did Popham's Broadway, a brilliant man those days. In fact, Broadway was a ditch, and Popham took the contract from, and while Broadway was a ditch, where we have MMC and Central was a hill, Hog's Hill, Pandrimalai. And Popham took a contract to demolish that hill and fill Popham's Broadway, and made a lot of money in the real estate as well. He was the first person to envisage a canal. Lord Clive, Edward Clive, he put up an advertisement for a tender asking for people to do this canal. That's because he believed in it. He believed, the governor of Madras believed that this canal would do great wonders to his company as well as its population. There's a person called Heathcote, must have been a Dutchman, who excavated the canal in record time. Some parts were done within a year. Basil Cochrane, who owned it. A gentleman owned a part of the canal. It was private. The government paid him a royalty and bought it out finally. Cochrane, as a small piece of trivia, was a first cousin of Samuel Johnson's biographer Boswell. We all have learnt about Boswell in school, literature and history. Cochrane was a first cousin. And finally, Arbuthnot and Co. managed this canal for some time. It was a money spinner. And a lot of people made a lot of, they made their fortunes on this. But finally, it was the Duke of Buckingham and Chandos, whose name is immortalized in Madras. And he was actually called the play-safe Duke. Wouldn't take much of a risk. So when he decided to do the Buckingham Canal, people knew it was going to be a success. His full name was Right Honorable Richard Plantagenet Campbell Temple Nugent Bridges Chandos Grenville, Duke and Marquess of Buckingham and Chandos. He was the governor of Madras from 1875 to 1880, and he's not thought to have been a very proactive or able holder of this office. This cartoon was published in Vanity Fair, which it said on his assumption of office, and it said, "Play safe, Duke." During 1877 and 1878, the people of Chennai suffered a great famine. More than 6 million people perished in the presidency, and a substantial part of that was also in the city. The 5-mile stretch linking the Adayar and Coombe rivers was built in 1877-88 at the cost of 33,000 pounds sterling as a famine relief work. They would give food to the starving people, so they dug it. It was dug in record time. I think it was a year by which they completed this canal. It was called the Junction Canal. The blue line is the canal. I have highlighted it, connecting the Adayar and the Coombe. And it was called the Junction Canal because Adayar and Coombe were earlier junctions of the Southern Canal and the Northern Canal. It is not that business was not happening before this canal was done. Business was happening from the north and stopped at Coombe. Business was happening from the south and stopped at Adayar. This linkage enhanced the market so that these people from the south could go up to Nellore and for those from the north could go up to Marakan. There seems to be many existing water bodies, possibly freshwater ponds or salty lagoons, which were incorporated into the canal. This is between the Adayar and the Coombe. Left is Adayar, right is Coombe. You can see the water bodies before the canal was excavated. This long, I am pointing my mouse at this long canal, snake-shaped canal is somewhere near All India Radio. All that has been, I think that should be the St. Bede's playground right now. The most important water body which was linked and vanished or swallowed by the Buckingham Canal was the North River. People assume Coombe was the reason, and I have been guilty of saying that many times, that Madras came here. But I think the Elambur River or the North River as the British called it, had bigger role. It flowed right into the middle of the fort at one point, then it was diverted to join the Coombe and form the island. I think this must have given them the fresh water inside the fort or recharged their wells at some point of time. And this part of the river that runs next to the central station, the North River, was incorporated into the Cochrane Canal and later into the Buckingham Canal. The Buckingham Canal is 796 kilometers long. It connects most of the natural backwaters along the coast. We have different types of water inside, some fresh water, some saline, and some drainage water. The drainage water part is in the Junction Canal in Madras. Soon after the completion, there was a shock waiting for the people. It was found that it was fit for navigation only during high tide, when the water was high, and only small craft could go. This state of affairs started an entire reconsideration of the full plan, and between 1883 and 1891, floodgates were installed. Just like what works in Panama, you could go to a video, browse for a video on YouTube for Panama canals and see how the floodgates work, the locks work. And floodgates and diversion canals in some places were added. By the end of 1897, locks had been constructed along the whole length of the canal and ensured that the canal had at least 4 feet of water even during low tide. The Buckingham Canal was almost like a highway. So it included milestones. This milestone, I should thank Benedict Xavier, architect. I picked up his photograph, a milestone, and it had toll stations. People would be just like you pay toll on the roads today, you have to pay toll. And there were travelers' bungalows on some places on the sides of the canal. And there were inspectors who used to separate boats, go up and down the canal and inspect, just like your railway inspectors. The government even passed a Ferry and Canal Act, which passed rules on how to transport and what to transport and the size of the boats. And one rule that they had is lights in front of the boats were necessary when traveling in the night. This canal was also called by several names: Cochrane's Canal, Lord Clive's Canal, East Coast Canal, and finally the Buckingham Canal has been imprinted in history and in our minds. There were several types of boats which went here. I am not doing a comprehensive study on that. Some of the boats were 85 feet long. Some were smaller. The Madras top boat, the Madras open cargo boat, principally employed in the firewood traffic and the shell traffic. They were doing the shell for the limestone. The northern cargo boat called the dinghies, and the northern Radari boat, which are the passenger boats. We have some travelers' accounts on traveling in this canal. Some are positive and some are negative. As Sujata said, we have Olcott and Annie Besant going. It has been an annual holiday affair for the Theosophical Society schools to go on a 3-day trip to Mahabalipuram via the Buckingham Canal and describe it. But this gentleman is Lear, Edward Lear, the limerick writer, who even made a limerick about Madras and Nas, and he says, the canal boat is covered and low and not all that too comfortable. I doubt if I can bear being inside for long, yet must go. Tracking along the canal is quite work enough. No sail has been put up. That means somebody is pulling the canal from the banks. Only when there's a wind, they put up the sail. I can see a distant line of cocoa trees and flat green fields near at hand. I can see beautiful parrot green foliage of coconut trees and bamboos on the water's edge. The noise made by the older boatmen drove me mad. Perhaps the boatman could not push it silently. Drove me almost mad, coming as it after the bad thumps on his head. Because the roof was low, Lear was hitting his head on the roofs. Moreover, the boat leaks and creaks. Very nearly, I am on the point of ordering it around. He wants to get back to Madras. But then a fair wind has started and will carry me through to my destination. So he draws a lot of sketches of Mahabalipuram. The bottom left is of the pagodas, or more so because it is from the river, it must be that Pidari Radham, the unfinished Rathas at the edge of the Buckingham Canal. Boat ride on Buckingham Canal in the 40s. We have a lot of descriptions from those who remember it from their school days. School excursions and tourists. Tickets were available in Kesava Perumalpuram, today's Kesava Perumalpuram at Saidarpet, and many stations along the coast. It took 3 days, and if there was no wind, the sails were not unfurled, and people dragged the boats by a rope from the, just like a manual dragging from the coast. Finally, the Buckingham Canal was one long navigable stretch that was used well into the 1960s. This is detail I just picked up from the net, but I'm not very sure about the accuracy, but seems very possible. 1960-61, 1,250 boats were licensed to ply on the canal, and the year they carried around 19,000 passengers and 1,90,000 tons of goods. It could be because most of that was rice or salt or firewood, valued at 185 lakhs. The only doubt that I have is, was it happening so late into the 1960s? What were the goods that were coming in? Rice, straw, firewood, salt, and vegetables. Rice because Madras was a rice-eating city. Straw because the city moved on bullock carts and horse jatkas. Straw was very, very important. Firewood because the city cooked only on casuarina poles and other types of wooden fuel. They didn't have kerosene fully, or they didn't have gas at all. Salt. Salt is very important for people to survive, and salt was coming from Maracana and traveling to a lot of hinterland via the Buckingham Canal. And vegetables. People within 50 to 100 kilometers started growing vegetables which could be transported, and there's a big market for vegetables in Madras. A lot of people within the 50-kilometer radius of Madras and within the proximity of the Buckingham Canal made a lot of money, we can guess. Some other things were also transported. Indigo was transported from Nellore side when the canal was extended beyond the Durga Rajapatnam in 1856. So this is indigo from it's a display in Smithsonian Institution, but we do get a lot of indigo powder here for sale as well. And indigo is something that the British valued for the blue and violet color, and we had a lot of riots and a lot of freedom movements based on indigo. The Buckingham Canal was used to transport indigo perhaps to Madras, from where it was shipped to Europe. This is the Thannithurai market near on Rayapata High Road near Vidyamandir. Thannithurai means port on the water. So it is so Buckingham Canal already started giving the port status to many places. Thannithurai market was demolished recently, but it was situated on the Buckingham Canal off Lusk Corner. It sold produce brought from the land as well as boats plying in the canal, which originated in South Andhra Pradesh and Marakanam side. The Thannithurai literally means water port. The market is a century old and initially belonged to Madras High Court Judge Bashi Mayenga, and eventually was bought by 18 vegetable vendors. And nowadays it's a big flat next to that Anjaneya temple on Rayapata High Road. Salt kotas, Kottaram, Kudaram, Kottaru in Telugu means a godown. So salt has to be stored. Salt is quite easy to make when you have a sunny climate, but very tough to store when it is monsoon. So the person who can store salt actually can multiply his capital many times. So salt kotas must have been a storage spot on the Buckingham Canal, just behind the central station. It was storage for salt coming from Marakanam to be traded when the market went up. The canal actually increased the status of salt making to a large scale industry because of the increased market. The market increased over 600 kilometers, and from there the hinterland. If salt could travel, say, 100 kilometers inside, we're talking about a market of 60,000 square kilometers where salt can be sold. So salt making became a very big business in Kovalam, Marakanam, many parts up to almost Pondicherry. We used to even have a salt commissioner, a salt customs officer who used to have an office at Marakanam to check the boats. We also have a lot of incidental history. Ice House is one such incidental history because they're looking at all sorts of buildings on the banks of Buckingham Canal. The Ice House was almost closing down when the Buckingham Canal was starting. So there no ice was transported on this, but this building is a very important part of Madras history. Ice House, the ice business, the frozen water business as it was called, collapsed with the invention of the refrigeration. It is a seafront building in Madras which proudly flew the American flag for several decades. There were just two buildings which flew the American flag on the beach road, perhaps even entire Chennai. The other one was the consul's office, which was in Parry building. As early as 1833, ice came to Madras and changed desserts on the dining table forever. It also lowered to a great degree the homesickness of the East India officials and sustained their empire building exercise. It was on the way out, as I said earlier, when the canal was being excavated. Nearly 150 tons of ice cut in blocks from frozen Boston lakes 4 months earlier in the year arrived in Madras after crossing 2 oceans and the equator twice. and losing almost a third of its cargo. If you bring in 150 tons of ice, you would end up with 100 tons of ice in Madras. The ship would stop 2 kilometers away because there was a sandbar which was preventing them from coming in. There was no port at that time, remember? They would dock exactly opposite the building. The customs were normally waived because of the goods were perishable, and boats would transfer the ice to the shore. Coolies would then carry the ice to the basement of the ice house, which was a double shell structure and could hold 150 tons of ice. Perhaps Tudor was wondering one day his ship could bring the entire load of ice intact. Each cargo made $3,300 of profit for Tudor, which was phenomenal those days. 1833, we are talking about 200 years back, somebody making $3,300 on a single shipload. Though it's not associated with trade, I would also mention that Vivekananda, this was later after the debacle in which ice industry went down, this was renamed as Kernan Castle, and Vivekananda on a second trip would stay here. First trip, I think, he stayed in Santo, and the third trip, he was not allowed to come into Madras. The reason being, he was coming from Calcutta, which was plague ridden, and the quarantine rules did not permit Vivekananda from getting out of his ship. He would stand on his ship and sermonize, while all his disciples would listen from boats below. But during the second visit, Vivekananda stayed here. He went for walks on the beach. He wrestled with fishermen whose language he did not understand. He tried to talk to them. It is a very memorable visit because Vivekananda had come triumphantly from Colombo. That was after the Chicago visit. While at this incidental history, I am also mentioning the other. There are 3 Divya Prabandha shrines and 2 Devaram shrines and 1 Tripugal shrine on the banks of the Buckingham Canal. Kadal Mallai, which is Mahabalipuram, Thiruvidandai, Thiruallikeni, that is Triplicane, are the Divya Prabandham Tirupatis. Mylapur and Thiruvandur have Devarams for them, and Tiruporur has a Tirupugal for it. These are all in a kilometer, half a kilometer distance from the Buckingham Canal. The Descano Church. Descano Church is a Portuguese church which is also associated with St. Thomas. It is on St. Mary's Road. Now it has been terribly, the heritage has been terribly spoiled. Actually, you can see the toilets of the quarters adjoining the old Portuguese building because they have built a new church. Descano Church on St. Mary's Road was where Thomas used to rest, according to legend, when he came from St. Thomas Mount to the beach. The economic benefits of Mylapore and Triplicane have never been really studied because of because of the canal have never been really studied. The canal ran through Mylapore and Triplicane and Shepok. They were already established villages, so that they were ready to grab the opportunities that the canal threw up. An ever-growing Madras was gobbling up all villages, and by then Mandavelli or Greenways Road were still grazing lands and did not have the potential to make money out of the canal. So Mylapore and Triplicane especially made a lot of economic wonders with the canal. But more than the economics, it was a cauldron of caste. Castes are very equally divided in villages by streets. And there is no mixing in the 1850s and 1860s. The canal threw together people in a cauldron. In Triplicane, you had to have people coming in from outside who had to transport the goods, who had to deal in goods, who were the commission agents, who were the buyers, transporters, consumers, people who educated them, people who were who ran the temples for them. Everybody was put into a small 4 square kilometer, 5 square kilometer radius. Increased economic activity changed the setting of Triplicane and Mylapore. Till then, a sleepy town. People from all strata of society had to mix on purpose in the interest of economy. This set the sparks flying. The Dravidian movement has its origin in Triplicane. Very soon after the Buckingham Canal started working, boats started plying. Historians would say the most powerful movement in Madras, which still controls the politics today and has been in the headlines for the last 100 years, started from a hostel. The traditional hostels and hotels of Triplicane were run by the Brahmins, who would not allow the non-Brahmins to use them. In fact, somebody had to throw their holy thread to even get in. U.S. Swaminarayan mentions it somewhere that he himself was asked to do it. And at this point, non-Brahmin boys who had come from outside or who had wanted to study in colleges and schools which were proliferating in Triplicane, did not have places to stay. So that they could not study also because of logic. So Nadesan, a lawyer at that time, starts a hostel. It's a non-Brahmin hostel. And boys are staying there. And at that time, Nadesan, for the evening activity, engages them in political debate, political classes as well. Around the year 1900, to see a Brahmins only board in eateries and hostels was in the traditional areas of Mylapore and Triplicane was very, very common. So this hostel slowly grows into a Dravidian movement when Nair and Tyagaraja Chetty, who are both elsewhere, are brought together by Nadesan. A newspaper, it's called South Indian Liberation Party, but the newspaper is called Justice, so it becomes the Justice Party. They run the government till 1937 when they are defeated by Rajaji. So even today, the DMK, the DK and the DMK are offshoots of the Dravidian movement, and Triplicane has a big role to play in this. The other important activity that happened for the thrust of the Dravidian movement was the widows. It was a remarkable piece of activity by Sister Subbulakshmi and the Brahmana Widows Hostel. After being in many places, took for rent the High House, and it was not very comfortable because it had circular walls, and people said the widows should be given a better life after them. Some of them walked 500 kilometers to come and get themselves admitted. Once here, they were very happy. They performed plays, they learned to swim in the sea, and even played badminton. Lady Willington, who supported this move of Sister Subbulakshmi, would stop at widow's home to talk to the girls. Sometimes she took the girls on a picnic in a boat from behind his ice house up to Mahabalipuram on boat. This is another account of the Buckingham Canal that we get. She would take them on a picnic to Mahabalipuram by boat. The widow's home became a beacon to many suffering women. Some even walked 500 miles to seek admission. 3 of these widows graduated in the first batch of Queen Mary's College. But it raised some eyebrows. There were loud protests to say why a Brahmin widows hostel alone had to be sea-facing villas and funded by the government. Other communities neither had sea-facing villas nor widows' home for their widows. Chelmsford of the Reforms fame actually raised it. Montagu Chelmsford, when they came in, they said there's a partisanship on the part of the government to support one community. But he was told that widows from other communities were not eligible for secondary education, which was the main point of starting this home, to educate the widows. But there were certainly fears that if non-Brahmin widows were accepted, Orthodox Brahmin families would stop sending the widows and this would collapse. But this had a lot of publicity on how the government was being, manipulated into funding one community's activities. And this gave a thrust to the Dravidian parties as well. So 2 buildings on either side of the Buckingham Canal were responsible for the starting of the Dravidian movement. In culture, let us see about literature first. First is Valangaiman Shankaranarayana Srinivasa Sastri, the silver-tongued Sastri, who went to the Round Table Conference, who was the Congress representative in South Africa, in Malaya, who Gandhi used to call him Anna, and he was the person who edited my Experiments with Truth. On his last visit to Madras, Gandhi would go and see Srinivasa Sastri twice in GH in 1946. He taught English in Hindu High School. Hindu High School has a very distinguished alumni. We'll come to that later. But Srinivasa Sastri also started the Madras Teachers Guild, and he also wrote many books, and his command over English sometimes put to shame even Britishers. So good was his language that his books were often referred for improving the ruler's language. The lady below is Vaimu Kodai Nayaki, the most prolific writer in Tamil perhaps. She wrote 150, women writers of course. She wrote 115 books over 45 years. She edited her own magazine Jagan Mohini, ran her own press. She went to jail for Quit India movement, did a lot of things. But the amazing fact was she was illiterate when she wrote her first novel. She had a story in her mind, she dictated it to somebody who wrote it down, and the reviews and the response that the novel or that drama that was printed got encouraged her to study Tamil, learn and to read and write, and do 114 books. So she used to live opposite the Bharatiyar Memorial. Bharati, of course, was for the last 2 3 years after his return from Pondicherry, perhaps was here. Is was not very prolific in writing here. All his poetry is still from Pondicherry and Georgetown. Bharati, of course, lived in this house. And the interesting thing about he lived as a tenant here. The government wanted to nationalize it, and it was knocked down before that. So the government had this particular photograph helped them to redo this building again, where you can visit the Bharati Memorial. Music and sabas in Madras did not start in where it is, you can find it these days. It started in Triplicane, or at least the older. It started in Georgetown and started in Triplicane. The oldest surviving sabas are, of course, in Triplicane, and the sabha actually took over the baton of Carnatic music and performing arts from the zamindars or the minor kings who were the patrons for it. Once they vanished in the late 1800s, the sabhas had to be organized as a matter of need to keep this arts alive. So Rajaji would say Sri Parthasarathi Swami Sabha has been one pioneer in the renaissance of Carnatic music and Bharata Shastra in South India during its long continuous career of usefulness. It has taken every opportunity to cultivate sound taste and to encourage worthy exponents of the musical and dramatic arts. The Parthasarathi Swami Sabha was started in 1896 in a place called a Blue House of Mani Trimalacharya. Then it was registered. Of course, when it was started, it was called Sangeet Vidvat Sabha, but then it was changed as Parthasarathi Swami Sabha to honor the patron god of Triplicane. And it was held in a house called Blue House in the South Mada Street. It's a corner house from a Blue House where kacheris were held in an individual house before it moved to different locations. The other important art form that was encouraged in Triplicane was the Harikatha. It was a musical way of telling the ancient stories of India. This is Saraswati Bai. She also performed here. And Hindu high school seems to have had its own small sabha, which ended up. The sabhas did not have the money to build their own auditoriums till 1950s. Even Music Academy built it only in 1951-52. So schools were ideal places because the evenings were free and the halls were big. Even on Mint Street or Georgetown, we used to have schools which supported the sabhas in the evening time. So Hindu high school supported a sabha and also Harikatha for a long time. This is the Senate House of the, exactly almost on the point where the Buckingham Canal joins the sea, joins the Coombe River rather. It is Indo-Saracenic architecture. Chisholm, who won a competition to build this at the Presidency College, won a prize of 3,000 rupees among 17 entries. One of the earliest architecture competitions in India. And so he was transferred from Puri to Madras. He changed the skyline of Madras with red colored buildings. He would also change the skyline of Baroda with the biggest palace, a palace bigger than Buckingham Palace, the Lakshmi Vilas Palace. He would also do a museum in Trivandrum. And Chisholm would introduce his Indo-Saracenic architecture. Saracen means a Muslim. Indo was representing the Hindu. And there are not many Hindu elements. So at 40 feet, when you go to Senate House, you can see lots of gods. You can see Muruga, you can see Nataraja, you can see Krishna, you can see even a man cutting off his head, which is a ritual statue we find in a lot of temples in South India. A man cutting off his head to assure victory in a battle or for the betterment of society. And Chisholm picked up all these designs and made those statues and put them at 40 feet height. This is a panoramic map of Chepauk complex. The Chepauk became a very important focal point because a lot of people, there was not much development within the fort. The government needed another office, the private sector needed another office, another area to develop the office. It needed to be close to the fort as well. This is a panoramic map of the Chepauk complex. This was exactly when the College of Engineering, which is now in Kottapuram or Gindi, was there. This college started as a surveyor school. The oldest college outside Europe, engineering college. It was started as a surveyor school for orphans within the fort and then moved to Chepauk and then moved 100 years back to the banks of Adayar. So along this, we can see Presidency College, we can see Ghosh Hospital, and we can see the cricket ground within the Buckingham Canal running in between. This is the Kalas Mahal. Known for its intricate carvings, wide arches, red brick walls, and lime mortar, Chepauk Palace was built by the engineer Paul Benfield. It's not something that was very, very old. It was built by a British engineer who made a lot of money. In fact, he was maximum money to him was owed by the Nawab, and so this palace came for auction. It was one of the first buildings in India to be built in the Indo-Saracenic architecture. The Principality of Carnatic was abolished in 1855 as per the doctrine of lapse because they didn't have a heir. The Chepauk Palace was brought to auction to pay off the Nawab's debts and was eventually purchased by the Madras government because nobody had so much money to buy a palace. The palace functioned as the office of the Revenue Board and the Public Works Department Secretariat. It is being redone right now. I don't know how scientifically they're doing it, but the heritage is being restored in the Kailas Mahal. The Chepauk Stadium. Cricket has been a religion in Madras for a very long time. And Madras Cricket Club came in this place, which was part of the 110 acre or 120 acres belonging to the Nawab. 1846, an Arbuthnot, one of the many Arbuthnots. I think this was Alexander Arbuthnot, who forms the Madras Cricket Club. And then the cricket stadium Chepauk comes. India's first test victory in 1952 happened in this ground. Ranji Trophy started in this ground. So there's a lot of heritage, sports heritage on the banks of the Buckingham Canal. The next ground immediately close by. Incidentally, the Nehru Stadium also is very close to the Buckingham Canal, though it came later. And the Marina ground also is on the banks of the Buckingham Canal. Twice or thrice, Marina ground they wanted to do covered with buildings, but the governor actually intervened. And a gentleman called P.R. Subramaniam, who was an expert sports trainer, was instrumental in talking to the governor and saving the Marina ground almost twice. The Gosha Hospital. These things you would find in this Victoria Hostel Road. The government Kasturiba Gandhi Hospital was founded in 1885 as the Royal Victoria Gosha Hospital. The name Victoria was Mary Scarlett, the first woman doctor, first person to be admitted in Madras Medical College. Knew Victoria personally. Victoria would call her and talk to her about India. Victoria was very concerned about her dominion. And it is said that Mary Scarlett directly talked to Victoria and got the permission to name this hospital. It was meant for ladies who observed Parda and was initially located in Nogambakam before it was shifted here. A woman in 1870 would rather die of disease than go to a male doctor. Especially those who wore the Pardas, they would rather die. The mortality rate of women was very, very higher than men. Some of this should do a research on the proportion of childbirth death and as well as mortality during childbirth. And Gosha Hospital was the first started for these women who were wearing pardas. Of course, a lot of these zamindars, including Raja of Venkatagiri gave the money. It was built in Indo-Saracenic style and the hospital moved in. The government took it over in 1921. And today it's a center of excellence for reproductive and child health issues. It's a premier institution in the field of urogynecology. And of course, the building which gives a name for the road, Victoria Hostel. It stands opposite to the hospital. It was built in 1900. It was Indo-Saracenic style, a typical red color building. And Nambarmal Chetty built it from bricks from his own chula, from his own brick making unit in Chulaimede. And he was the leading contractor of those times, the first Indian to own a car in Madras. It's a beautiful building. It used to have a lot of arches in the front and all 3 floors. The Warden's Lodge attached to the hostel was Indo-Saracenic beauty and fronts the road. It is a residence of Henry Davidson Lowe, who wrote the Vestiges of Old Madras, one of the first historical accounts. I would like to talk about another incident which happens. The students here go and request Gandhi on one of his earlier visits that he should come and visit the hostel. Gandhi placed down a condition saying that I will come at 4:30 in the morning. The students are shocked, but they get up ready. When Gandhi comes in, he notes that there are half a dozen messes. Non-vegetarian, vegetarian Brahmin, vegetarian non-Brahmin, vegetarian Madhva, many types like that. Gandhi is shocked and talks to the students and says, come on, this is not right. You should have just 2 messes. Vegetarian, non-vegetarian, be happy about it. Don't have division of messes by caste. So Gandhi's visit to Victoria Hostel was a very important event. This is the most famous picture of Buckingham Canal, which everybody says is Kuam when this picture is marked. The canal runs next to the central station, right up to Andhra. It is the second terminus. A lot of people think this was the first railway station in Madras. Actually, Rayapuram was the first station, and it became overwhelmed with the traffic, and so a second junction had to be built, and Central was built. It is in Park Town. Earlier, it was called George Pereira Gardens. A Portuguese gentleman, a trader, owned all this space, and it was built on his garden space. Before the Marina Beach came, and as many of you know, the Marina Beach did not exist when the Buckingham Canal was done. So when the port was made, sand acquisition happened, and so the Marina Beach was formed. So before Marina Beach came, the biggest recreation activity in Madras was the People's Park. The People's Park lay exactly The 110 acres lay on the Buckingham Canal. Much before the marina became the largest spot for social congregation, the governor of the presidency, Charles Trevelyan, had his brainwave in the late 1850s to set up a spot for leisure. That was the origin of the sprawling People's Park. When it was opened to the public in 1859, it was 116-acre park. It had amenities never heard of in Madras. It had a public bath, perhaps the first swimming pool, an equestrian track of 5.5 miles, tennis courts. People could go play tennis. Perhaps the first tennis courts in Madras were on the banks of the Buckingham Canal. For those who wanted to laze around, there were 11 lakes with boating and huge lawns. There used to be an annual fair every year. And there's even a fire in the late 1800s, a big fire in which a lot of people died, and shows the focus on firefighting in Madras. So it improves a lot after that. So at one point of time, Madras, which had one of the earliest zoos, was shifted to the People's Park. So People's Park had a zoo. It had Victoria Public Hall where it had dramas, and it also had a park. The zoo was earlier in the museum grounds. Balfour started it. Too much of smell and too much of noise, and a lot of high-end people settling down, and they wanted to move this out. They wanted to move the museum to be exclusive. The zoo went from strength to strength in this spot. And finally, in 1942, a great tragedy overtook the zoo. The Japanese were about to bomb Madras, and nobody knew when a bomb would fall on the zoo and release the animals. Cities throughout the world faced this problem. Some cities like Berlin did not kill its animals and was bombed by RAF, and street-to-street hunt was organized to kill these dangerous creatures. So in Madras, what happens? The date is set for killing the animals, and Malabar police comes in, and the corporation commissioner or corporation mayor Chakrai Chetty begs zoos across India to take the carnivorous animals even for free. But nobody wants to take it because they also have the same problems. Japanese bomb, no fodder, no manpower. So what exactly is happening is the Malabar police is brought in, and all the tigers, the lions, the bears, or the panthers are shot. In a half an hour, a dozen or 20, 30 animals are shot, and the herbivorous animals, including giraffes, ostriches, and others, are moved away to Erode by special train. Education institutes started cropping up on the banks of Buckingham Canal. Most of this happened after the canal came. This is not incidental history. Perhaps because students traveled here, or perhaps it was easy to build raw material coming when the roads were not too good. But the colleges started coming up. The Presidency College was established as a preparatory school, and then it was upgraded to a high school and then a graduate college. It is one of the oldest arts colleges in the country. In 1870, it moved to this site. Almost, it's a twin of the Buckingham Canal, and it had very distinguished alumni. It has 3 Bharat Ratnas among the old students and 2 Nobel laureates. I don't think any other college, we should check up, any other college in India has so many people coming. Of course, one person got both, C.V. Raman got both the Bharat Ratna and the Nobel Prize. But total it has 2 Nobel Prizes, Subramaniam Chandrasekhar and C.V. Raman, and 3 Bharat Ratnas. I think C. Subramaniam, Rajaji, and C.V. Raman got the Bharat Ratnas, the highest possible civilian award in India. Queen Mary's College, that is Dorothy de la Haye. In 1914, the historic Madras College for Women it was called, and Queen Mary would take 2 years to give consent to add her name to the college. It was the second oldest college in the presidency, first being Lady Doak, but it was the first women's college in Madras. The motto of the college was common sense and consideration. Queen Mary's has attracted gifted students who have contributed much to society in various fields. Queen Mary used to be looked with a sense of awe by the rest of the society. Dorothy de la Haye didn't want to settle down in Madras. Her brother was the principal the scandalous principal who got murdered in the Princess School. And Dorothy Lay would say this college is destined to have an influence on the future of Indian womanhood. How true. Queen Mary's College did live up to her expectations. The Sanskrit College in Mylapore was founded in 1906 by the habitual institution founder, Krishna Swami Iyer. He founded Indian Bank, he founded the Venkatesh Hospital for Ayurveda. Many organizations have owed it to him for having been started. Krishna Swami Iyer was a former judge of Madras High Court. He was also a member of the Executive Council of Government of Madras. That time, the sense of loyalty was very, very undefined. So Krishna Nair was very, very loyal to the British Emperor. Actually, he actually enlisted a poet, Suri, I think Lakshmana Suri, to write 100 songs. I'm not very sure about the poet's name, but a 100 stanza song on, it was called George Sadakam, 100 songs on the King Emperor, and took it to Delhi to present it to the Emperor. But he would start Sanskrit College, and it has grown rapidly since its inception, and it's been restoring and regenerating indigenous tradition and culture. The Indian National Congress owes its existence to the Buckingham Canal. Krishna Vilas, the home of Raghunatha Rao, who had been a Diwan of Indore, he lived very close, his backyard at the Buckingham Canal. He had invited 17 eminent persons who had earlier participated in the Theosophical Conference, and they wanted to discuss what Alan Octavian Hume had spoken under the banyan tree in Theosophical Society. It was about forming an organization that would speak on their behalf to the ruling powers and seek a greater degree of freedom for the people of the country. 17 people from Bombay, Calcutta, Madras, Delhi, UP, and Northeast Province met in this Mylapore house. You can see it's just the house now, a very big flat called Vishwa Kamal. It is next to the Alliance Publisher, very close to the MRTS station. This is where the 17 people met, and the next meeting was in Bombay, and the Congress was formed. So the preliminary work for the Congress happened on the banks of the Buckingham Canal. The Buckingham Canal also had a lot of people living on its banks, a lot of cultured people who were very interesting, who had interesting lives. Dr. M.C. Nanjunda Rao, who started his career as assistant professor in Madras Medical College. Then he set up his own practice. He was a very influential doctor for the high and mighty in Madras. His house was in Brody's house. It's called Sasi Vilas in the same South Madras Street, or rather the Ramakrishnan Street, opposite the temple tank. He was a nationalist as well. And this, I'm not talking about the rest of his experiences with Vivekananda or something else, but I'd like to talk about the two poets who were influenced. Sarojini Naidu got married in his house, and he helped Subramanya Bharati escape as a dressed like a fakir to Pondicherry via the Buckingham Canal. There is another theory which says that Bharati went by train. There is not too much of confirmation, but a lot of stories indicate that he went by the canal to Pondicherry. Sarojini Naidu married Mutyala Govindraju Naidu. It was intercaste marriage, a lot of opposition, but the marriage happened in the house of Nanjunda Rao. So when the city expanded, for a lot of time the city never crossed Adayar. They would even close the biggest lake, the long tank in Mangalam, to live, but they would not cross the Adayar. The Elphinstone Bridge had come very much ahead. A proper bridge across the Coombe, the Napier Bridge, came only in 1941. Before that, it was a rusted iron bridge. But the Elphinstone Bridge was a Pakka bridge across, but nobody would go to Adayar to live, because on one side was the Theosophical Society and one side was the St. Patrick's School. Huge compounds, several hundred acres, and it was to be scary to cross that. But in 1948, 7 days before Gandhi was shot, coincidentally, an area was acquired on the south bank of Adayar, on the east bank of the Buckingham Canal, the corner where the two met, where the lock is, to form the Gandhi Nagar. It was actually the ground which was attached to the St. Patrick's School. Patrick's School was very good in those days for the band. When the Patrick's School had moved to Coimbatore fearing a Japanese bomb, it was empty. It gave an idea to Daniel, who was the local administration minister in the first cabinet, in post-freedom cabinet in Madras presidency. So he wanted an expanding city to welcome its migrants. So they built up Gandhinagar. A lot, because Gandhinagar involved building houses and selling them, a lot of raw material. We still have the data for the raw material which moved through the Buckingham Canal from the south. Bricks came, mortar came, wood came for the Gandhinagar from the Buckingham Canal. The Buckingham Canal even today is on the western bank of the Gandhinagar. Gandhinagar was a cultural burst as well as an expansion, starting of expansion. The Nehru Nagar, the Kasturiba Nagar, Venkatesh Nagar, Indra Nagar would all come on the banks of the Buckingham Canal when the city grew. But Gandhinagar, I would like to personally say, Gandhinagar was where the Ponniyin Selvan was written, where a lot of artists and writers lived. MGR used to live there, and Kalki used to live there. And sitting on these banks, perhaps Kalki wrote the Ponniyin Selvan. One important and controversial point I'd like to make is Archbishop Matthias. Archbishop Matthias started a lot of institutions, Catholic Center, the Medical College in Bangalore, a lot of institutions. But it was also during his time that the Catholic Church in Madras lost a bulk of its property. Archbishop Matthias sold the entire Gandhinagar to the Madras government for 17 lakhs, and he would build a Catholic center. And at that time, he would also build, though it's not directly on the banks of the Buckingham Canal, he would also sell the boat club, big part of boat club, to the American government for building the consul's house, to a lot of big people, and even have a road named after Archbishop Matthias. The church lost its most valuable properties during Archbishop Matthias' tenure. So I come to the end of this talk. I would like to say it's tough to imagine that the Buckingham Canal has been a scenic place, but a lot of postcards by Higginbothams and other things. We have a beautiful, this is actually in Greenways Road. The Greenways Road is so congested. The railway track, the slum, and the bungalows block views of the Buckingham Canal. And block it rightfully so, because it's not too good a sight to be seen. But it is tough to imagine the Buckingham Canal had been a scenic place. A competition from the rail and later road transport diminished its importance. Technology started going up in railways and the road laying, and technology did not improve the canal. In the 20th century, portions had become unusable and badly polluted. Today, it is silted up, drainage clogs it. It has been encroached for more than half its width. People even say 3/4 of its width is already gone. Every year, it's been losing inches. And the MRTS brick pillars, I mean the pillar footings, are exactly in this river, stopping and clogging it. It has become a drainage. No boat can go because it is silted up so high, then you can't have boats, because even those days when the boats went under the bridge, they would lower the sail so that it doesn't hit, and people used to bend down. But now the openings are just 5 or 6 feet, and no boating is possible these days. The Buckingham Canal has been an important geographical feature which contributed to the growth of the city and its prosperity. But now it lies destroyed. Sometimes it is very nice to be honest and frank. The Buckingham Canal has outlived its usage, perhaps. Waterways can still be the cheapest transport, but running through such a big city, I don't think, it's my personal opinion, that it can be saved. At least the part within Madras. Of course, other parts can be dredged and can be used for trade. This part of Madras, Buckingham Canal, is gone forever. But oral history is also important. It's not that only tangible history is your heritage. Oral heritage. People should remember the stories of Buckingham Canal. People should record it. In 5-10 years, if we don't record it, we lose the records, we lose the eyewitnesses. And so local history gathers an importance, and crowdsourcing gathers an importance. When people gather together in crowds and discuss an item of common interest, a lot of new things do come up. Somebody might have an interest in Bharati, and Buckingham Canal comes in. Somebody might have an interest in Presidency College, and Buckingham Canal comes in. If we consolidate all of this, a comprehensive history of the Buckingham Canal can be done. Thank you so much. I'm through, Sajjata.
Thank you, Venkatesh. I'll request Padma to take questions. If anybody has any questions, could you please
share it on the chat.
Or ask now.
It was a very illuminating talk, very interesting to hear about the Buckingham Canal and all the history connected to it, especially during Madras Week. I think there are a lot more compliments than comments. So I guess so far no questions. Probably we can open up. If anyone can raise their hands on Zoom.
Does Buckingham Canal have a future for future Chennai? Somebody's asked that. My personal opinion is no. It can be beautified, made a waterway, but I don't think it may be used for trade. There should be some way of letting in treated drainage and make it look much more nicer, because it's touching a lot of important habitations in Madras. It should be done, but in what form can we afford to do it, I don't know.
What is there any walkway or anything planned? It's on the Buckingham Canal. Do you know?
What is it?
A walkway or any plans for the
plans
Buckingham
like this
Canal?
keep coming up for Coombe and Buckingham Canal all the time. Walking tracks, bicycling tracks. the point is, they will not stop it from sinking, will not stop it unless you go, your focus should be on treating the drainage. Your heritage conservation will come 10 years down the line. If you start today and start treating the drainages, it will take you time, a decade to build the sewage treatment plants because they are thickly congested areas. And all these walkways should come 10 years down the line. A walkway now near the home would rather spread corona than be useful.
Is there any plans to clean up the Buckingham Canal? Is there any?
They come frequently off. They come frequently. There's all these. Now I think the Kuam is now be under focus, and people are putting up a several thousand crore plan to clean up the Kuam. But none of these plans have worked out. The first plan to clean the Kuam was in 1930s, and nothing has happened. The city's population explosion negates all these ventures, even if we are serious about it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a very, very illuminating talk. I really enjoyed it. I'm sure everyone did. There are a lot of participants, over 100 participants.
I wish to thank somebody. I'll just thank somebody. Hemachandra Rao has done immense work on Buckingham Canal. The history of Buckingham Canal, the hydraulics of it. He has traveled from, we are all textbook historians. He has traveled physically at his age from one end of Buckingham Canal to the other, seen it visually. There are a lot of people. Xavier Benedict has done immense work on the Buckingham Canal, on the Pulicat Lake. I would like to thank all of them for opening this information. What I did today was just consolidating them into 1 hour so that it will interest a lot more people to go deeply into this. And none of these photographs were mine. They were all from the Madras Local History Group or from the press. I wish to thank everybody, and this is fair use, so I think you'll pardon me.
Thank you. I hand over the mic to Soumya.
Just adding on to that, Mr. Hemachandra Rao has a wonderful museum that he's set up. He even has a miniature, a scaled down boat of the kind of boat that plied the Buckingham Canal, which you don't see in too many photographs. In fact, Mr. Manohar Devdas's sketch captures that in good measure, but there are not too many photographs of that period. And Mr. Hemachandra Rao's museum is a great treat for children. When this COVID blows over, I'd encourage parents to please take their children and visit, and maybe teachers can take groups of school children. It's an amazing museum. Thank you so much, Mr. Hemachandra Rao. He's listening on YouTube. He's not here on Zoom, but one day he will also be able to share his thoughts on the canal. Vincent is another person who's gone along with Mr. Hemachandra Rao along the length of the canal and has done great work discovering it along the way. So thank you, Venkatesh, for throwing light on some of the interesting facts along the river. And I hand it over to Soumya to give the vote of thanks.
On behalf of Intact Chennai chapter, I take pride in thanking Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan and for giving us their time out of their busy schedule. Mr. Elias Koshi was supposed to give some comments.
Yes.
Is he?
Yeah.
So I thank him also for giving us his time. Thank you, Mr. Venkatesh, for that ride down the memory lane. And it did give us a sense of identity and belongingness when we understood the historical perspective of the canal and the way it connected our industrious people on its banks, in spite of the social stratifications. Also, your mention of incidents connected to the landmark structures along its route enriched our learning experience. A special thanks to Mr. Manohar Devdas for making the talk more illustrative. Removal of encroachments along the canal has been a challenge to eco-restoration project proposals along the canal. We are happy to see that after much meandering, now the beautification and urban forest projects are afoot in some banks of the canal to paint its banks green. Now, this is a long time coming. We will be able to appreciate and support this restoration drive after you canalized our minds to make a maneuverable path to protect this man-made resource and its cultural heritage. Lastly, I would like to thank the participants for showing interest and our convener and all our team members for making this happen. Thank you.
Koshi, we're very honored that you're here with us today. Elias Koshi is a conservation architect, and he worked with INTAC on listing and documentation projects while even he was doing his master's in the School of Architecture and Planning. And he went on to the University of York for a degree in conservation studies on the Charles Wallace India Trust Scholarship, and was a resident architect at Dakshin Chitra for 2 years when architect Laurie Baker's dreams were being initiated into construction. He's currently a practicing architect and has done study on the Buckingham Canal. And we're very honored you're here, Koshi. We welcome you back into the into INTAC's fold after a brief hiatus. Thank you for being here. Can we hear your comments, please?
Thank you, Sujata. Let me first thank Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan for this enlightening presentation. I think there has been so much of knowledge and so much of research which has gone into putting this together. It's one thing to have knowledge, but to actually connect it to relevant relevant incidents and relevant happenings in history, and that took from various contexts. I think it's quite a challenge, and I think he's done a great job in this, and I think we're all enlightened by what you have given. In fact, some of these visuals and pictures, I've almost spent about 30 years to try to see vestiges of Madras, and I can see some of these common pictures, but then some of them which you had shown, I've never seen anywhere at all. So I still feel that there is so much more which is hidden, which we should unearth and try to find out about our history. Now, coming back to this, the Buckingham Canal, Sujata, I just want to correct you on one thing. Actually, I have not done much work on Buckingham Canal. In fact, hardly any work on Buckingham Canal. The work that I had done was on my thesis, which was the Coombe River. My thesis was on the Coombe River, so I know Coombe River right from the Kosataleyar up to the the sand which is there near the Napier's Bridge. But of course, it was a very similar learning experience for me when I was in college, and that really took me to a lot of interest, because when I was studying the river, I came to know about all these landmarks besides it. And in fact, you find that most of the landmarks at that time faced the river. But the most unfortunate thing right now, what is happening is they're all turning their backs towards the river. So you can see the difference. So incidentally, I want to, let me just complete what Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan had said. I was in fact noting down the points which he had listed out. He had taken us through a whole, entity of things, like, say, for example, right from the history and the evolution. He went into the physical connection of the river itself. From there, he went to the socio-economic importance of the river, the trade which happened, and the religious activities, the political activities. Now, all these actually say that this river had a prime position in the history of the city. Now, one thing about the history of the city is that now the location of this river also becomes very important. Now, probably this river gained so much of importance because it was flowing near the White Town and the Black Town, which was the first development which happened in and around Chennai. So maybe this gained so much of importance because of its location, and also because it was nearer to the seashore. So there might have been many points wherein the sea was also accessible to this canal. So that could have been. I mean, I'm just thinking aloud. It could have been because of that also. To get a kind of connect in all these things together, I think there is this river should be seen as a strip of a magnet which is connecting so much of culture and political and even to the extent of personalities. He was talking about personalities who used to choose to live by this riverside. So I think it's a wide variety of culture, socio-economic, political, economic, and all these things, activities which he has connected together. I think it's a very well-researched presentation that he has done. We've learned a lot out of this, and one thing about the future of this river, again, I'm just wondering is, Mr. Venkatesh Ramakrishnan mentioned that it is not possible, but I hope, and I sincerely hope, that we are able to see at least a part of the river. Now in Central Station, it's been covered. And in many of these areas, which I've seen that in many of the rivers, which have become defunct over a period of time, gets either filled up or gets covered over. So the first step has started in the Central Station area where the top is covered up and it is made into a parking lot. I hope this doesn't happen in the remaining places. Let the citizens of Chennai realize the value of this river, which has served its community, its inhabitants for so many years. And it has made Chennai, in fact, Madras, a thriving place for both administration as well as for economic activities and trade activities. So I would like to, my intention was basically to summarize what he was trying to say. And I can see that now this shift is happening. I mean, because we had these connections happening in the, you will find that in most of the places that, even if you see places like Kerala, you have a river running, and then you have a lot of houses and a lot of developments facing towards the river. Now, so the reason is probably because transportation was much more easier, and that was the better mode of transport during that time. And now we find faster modes of transport, which is diverting us away from the river. So we're losing out on the thought of this. So probably we should look into ways, technologies can look into ways where we can spruce up these rivers and make them also effective modes of transport or navigation, so that these don't lose out on its prominence and its significance. So this is one thing which I hope would happen. And I'm still optimistic about this river. I wouldn't really rule it out. And I hope this, right now we were talking about the history of this river in the main city, which is the city of Madras. And I would say that it should extend even beyond that up to Nellore and even beyond Marakanam. And we should establish that entire length in which through which it gained its importance at the time when it was actually famous. Thank you very much, Mr. Ramesh. Thank you, Sujata, for actually inviting me to summarize on this. It was a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to also say that Buckingham Canal was one of Mr. Muthaya's pet peeves. And, being Madras Week and Madras Month, if he were here, I think it would have been a topic close to his heart. So it just brought that memory back, and I thought I'd share that. Infrastructure projects and what they do to our waterways is something that we need to consider before we draw a line on the map of Madras and say, here's an infrastructure project. So, years and years of effort goes to naught by one, stroke of, shall I say, thoughtlessness. Thank you so much. Thank you, Venkatesh.